This is a preview of our in-depth episode on the life and work of iconic Nigerian musician Fela Kuti. To get early access to the full episode, plus a lot of other great AOD goodies, subscribe at patreon.com/artofdarkpod or substack.com/@artofdarkpod. Enjoy. Fela said a lot of things. He made just an enormous body of work musically, and kind of like pouring through his stuff, thinking about what is the most succinct thing he ever said that kind of sums up what he was. And it's a little cheesy, but I think it's appropriate for him. He once said that the secret of life is to have no fear. And that's pretty much how Fela rolled.
Fear is the mind killer. I read somewhere.
Exactly.
There's no love in fear. I've heard this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so we're gonna see how true that actually was. First, before we kind of dive into it, everything Kevin said is true, but I want to kind of give you a sense of how big of a deal he is to some of the people who know him. I mean, we're talking about the Nigerian Elvis, Beatles, Bob Marley, Rage Against the Machine rolled into one, pretty much, and probably a few other people at the same time. And his influence and his appeal obviously didn't stay just inside of Nigeria. Paul McCartney had this to say. This is from a Guardian article. Let's see. He was in Lagos to record largely because he knew there was a music scene down there with Fela. This is during the Wings period. There was a music scene down in Lagos, Nigeria. He knew Fela was at the head of it. And when Paul McCartney went to see Fela at Fela's nightclub, the Shrine, which was in one of the most dangerous parts of Lagos, which was one of the most dangerous cities in the entire world at the time.
Lagos is huge. Lagos is a big city.
It is. Absolutely. It's gigantic. Paul McCartney said at the time that Fela's band, this would have been the Africa 70 band at the time, was, quote, the best band I've ever seen live. When Fela and his band eventually began to play, after a long, crazy buildup, I just couldn't stop weeping with joy. It was a very moving experience. And years later in an interview, Paul McCartney, I mean, this is when Paul McCartney's it's in the 2000s sometime. He says, yeah, I still remember that show. And they played a song that I've been looking for on record ever since, and I don't think they ever recorded it. And Paul McCartney literally goes over to the piano and plays this riff. So 30, 40 years have passed, and Paul McCartney still got this one Fela Kuti riff in his head that he can just play. And of course, McCartney's a musical genius, obviously. So, but still, just the fact that he can just sit down and play that and be like, I only heard it one time 40 years ago. It's crazy, right?
Yeah, I wish I wasn't tone deaf sometimes.
Right. Right. And I listened to that interview yesterday, and I don't remember the riff. So,
my favorite kind of engagement bait on the Bird website on Twitter is Beatles hate. It's just like, God.
It's an easy way to get a few impressions.
Paul McCartney can't play bass. You'll see people post, okay. And then and then the inevitable person will be like, bassist here.
Right.
You're wrong.
Dude, you're circling around one of my peeves. It's people can't, when it comes to artistic stuff, a lot of people really struggle to be like, I see that he's probably talented, but it's not for me. Right. And I think even the Fela music is like that.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I understand there's Beatles fatigue. I understand there are people who, that's not your type of rock and roll. You're a Stones person, or you're whatever. You're a purist. Okay. All right. I get you're much cooler than the rest of us. I understand.
Right.
Come on. I mean, but everybody has their niche interests, and I get it. Okay, it's fine. But really, let's the hyperbole on the internet, everything starts to get a little hysterical, and the girls are fighting again.
Right. Right.
You really have this much time on your hands?
Yeah, right. For sure. So let me read a little bit more from this a Guardian article here, and then we'll get into the meat of the thing. So Quote, in the 1970s, Paul McCartney wasn't the only superstar to recognize Fela's musical innovations, the way in which he fused high life and jazz with the rhythms of funk to create Afrobeat. That's another thing. Fela and his drummer, Tony Allen, basically invented a genre of music also, right? So there's that. When James Brown toured Nigeria in 1970, bassist William Bootsy Collins recalls, quote, Fela had a club in Lagos and we came to the club and they were treating us like kings. Fela loved James Brown. So we were telling them they're the funkiest cats we ever heard in our life. I mean, this is the James Brown band, but we were totally wiped out. That was one trip I wouldn't trade for anything in the world. Fela's, a little further down the article, Fela's influence spread in all kinds of directions. Gilberto Gil, now the Minister of Culture in Brazil, says that meeting Fela in Lagos changed his life. Brian Eno once told me that he owned more albums by Fela than by any other artist and that he listened to him over and over again. Indeed, his one musical regret was that he never managed to produce a Fela record. He had been known to lie awake at night dreaming of what such a record would sound like.